The Valyrian Empire was the most powerful civilization to ever exist in the world of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. But what most fans don't realize is that this dragon-riding superpower was built on something far darker than conquest. It was built on industrial-scale slavery, blood magic rituals, and genetic manipulation that would make Joseph Mengele look like an amateur. Today, I'm breaking down the 8 most brutal truths about the Valyrian Empire that explain why House Targaryen is so messed up, and why their downfall was inevitable from the start. And trust me, when you learn about the horrific experiments they conducted in the 14 Flames, you'll understand why some believe the Doom of Valyria wasn't a natural disaster, it was punishment. Before the Targaryens conquered Westeros, before Aegon and his sisters ever mounted their dragons, their ancestors were part of the most advanced and terrifying empire the world had ever seen. The Valyrian Freehold dominated Essos for nearly 5,000 years, using dragons and dark magic to build a civilization that makes the Seven Kingdoms look like primitive savages in comparison. In House of the Dragon, we've seen glimpses of Valyrian power through House Targaryen, but they're just a pale shadow of what the empire once was. The Targaryens were actually one of the least significant families in Valyria, minor dragonlords who fled before the Doom. Today, I'm going to explain the 8 most crucial aspects of the Valyrian Empire that you need to understand to fully appreciate House of the Dragon and why the Targaryens are the way they are. I've analyzed Fire and Blood, the world of Ice and Fire, and all the available lore to bring you the most complete picture of this fallen civilization. So let's dive into the blood-soaked history of the most powerful empire to ever exist in the Game of Thrones universe. The Shepherd origins from sheep to dragons. The Valyrians weren't always the terrifying dragonlords who conquered half the known world. They began as simple shepherds tending their flocks in the hills of the Valyrian Peninsula. This humble beginning is crucial to understanding their later obsession with power and dominance. According to legend, around 5,000 years before Aegon's conquest, these shepherds discovered dragons living in the 14 Flames, a chain of volcanoes that dominated the landscape. While most civilizations would have run screaming from fire-breathing monsters, the Valyrians did something unprecedented. They figured out how to tame them. The show hasn't explicitly mentioned this origin story, but it's hinted at in the House of the Dragon opening credits, where blood flows through the model of Old Valyria. This represents not just the Targaryen bloodline, but the blood magic the early Valyrians used to bind dragons to their will. What makes this origin so fascinating is how quickly power corrupted them. Within a few generations, these simple shepherds transformed into the most ruthless conquerors in history. They abandoned their pastoral lifestyle completely, building a society where manual labor was considered beneath them, work fit only for slaves. This transformation mirrors what we see happening to House Targaryen in House of the Dragon. Viserys tries to be a peaceful ruler, but the Targaryen instinct for domination and fire runs in their blood. As Daemon says in Season 2, it's not in our nature to be cattle. We're dragons. This mentality didn't start with the Targaryens. It began thousands of years earlier when their ancestors first mounted dragons and realized they could take whatever they wanted. Blood magic and dragon binding. The dark secret of dragon riders. The most controversial aspect of Valyrian power was how they actually controlled their dragons. The show presents dragon riding as a matter of Targaryen bloodline and bonding, but the full truth is much darker. The early Valyrians didn't just tame dragons through kindness and Targaryen exceptionalism. They used blood magic, specifically human sacrifice, to bind dragons to their will. The evidence for this is scattered throughout the lore, from the dragon-binding horns mentioned in the books to the consistent association between Valyrian magic and blood sacrifice. The Valyrians developed spells that allowed them to mentally dominate dragons, creating magical bonds that gave them control over these massive beasts. These spells required blood, and lots of it. The most powerful spells likely required king's blood, or the blood of those with magical properties, explaining the Valyrians' later obsession with maintaining the purity of their bloodlines. This practice continued in secret even after the Doom. In the books, Euron Greyjoy acquires a dragon-binding horn that bears the inscription, "No mortal man shall sound me and live." When the horn is blown at the King's Moot, the man who sounds it dies with charred lungs, a blood sacrifice to activate its power. The implications for House of the Dragon are significant. When Daemon tells Rhaenyra that dragons don't choose just anyone, he's right, but not for the mystical reasons the Targaryens believe. Their ability to ride dragons isn't because they're special or chosen, it's because their ancestors performed blood rituals so dark and terrible that they've been deliberately forgotten. This explains why the Targaryens are so obsessed with keeping their bloodline pure through incest. It's not just about maintaining their distinctive Valyrian features, It's about preserving the magical properties in their blood that allow them to control dragons. The slave empire building civilization on human suffering. The Valyrian Freehold was the most advanced civilization in the known world, with roads, architecture, and technology far beyond anything seen in Westeros. But this advancement came at a horrific cost: the lives of millions of slaves. Valyria wasn't just a society with slaves, it was a society built entirely on slavery. At its height, for every free Valyrian, there were at least 100 slaves. These weren't just household servants, they were worked to death in the mines beneath the 14 Flames, used as fodder in blood magic rituals, and treated as completely disposable. The mining operations were particularly brutal. Tens of thousands of slaves would be sent into the volcanic mines each day to extract gold, silver, and most importantly, the mysterious substances that fueled Valyrian magic. The heat was so intense that regular men couldn't survive it, so the Valyrians would work their slaves until they died, then simply replace them. This industrial-scale slavery explains how the Valyrians were able to build their famous roads, massive highways of fused stone that connected their empire. These weren't just engineering marvels, they were monuments to suffering, constructed by slaves using dragon fire and blood magic to melt and shape stone. In House of the Dragon, we see the Targaryens have largely abandoned these practices, but echoes remain. The way they view the small folk as disposable, their belief in their inherent superiority, and their casual cruelty all stem from their Valyrian heritage as slave owners. When Daemon casually kills a messenger in Season 1, or when Aemon terrorizes the small folk in Season 2, they're displaying the Valyrian mindset that non-Valyrians are lesser beings. The Valyrians didn't call their empire a kingdom, but a freehold, because all landholding Valyrians had a voice in government. But this democracy only extended to free Valyrians. The vast majority of the population lived and died in chains, building wonders they would never enjoy. The 40 families. Dragonlord oligarchy. At the height of the Valyrian Freehold, power was concentrated among 40 dragonlord families. These weren't just wealthy nobles, they were dragon-riding oligarchs who controlled the entire empire through their monopoly on dragons and magic. House Targaryen was among these families, but they were far from the most powerful. In fact, they were considered minor dragonlords, which explains why they were willing to abandon Valyria for Dragonstone based on Dennis Targaryen's prophetic dream. The truly powerful families were too invested in Valyrian politics to leave. These 40 families lived lives of unimaginable luxury and decadence. Their homes were massive palaces built with fused stone, their possessions adorned with gold and precious gems, and their every whim catered to by armies of slaves. They engaged in constant political maneuvering, forming alliances through marriage and occasionally eliminating rivals through assassination or outright dragon warfare. The Dragonlord families practiced incest regularly, marrying brother to sister, uncle to niece, or aunt to nephew to keep their bloodlines pure. This wasn't just a Targaryen quirk, it was standard practice among all Valyrian nobles. They believed that the ability to bond with and control dragons was in their blood, and they were determined to preserve it at all costs. This oligarchic system explains much about Targaryen behavior in House of the Dragon. Their incestuous marriages, their obsession with bloodlines, and their instinct to solve problems with fire and blood all stem from centuries of Valyrian culture. When Viserys names Rhaenyra his heir despite tradition favoring male succession, he's actually following the more flexible Valyrian approach to power, where women could be dragon riders and leaders. The Targaryens brought Valyrian political culture to Westeros, but they adapted it to Westerosi realities. Instead of being one family among 40, they became the sole royal house, concentrating all the power that had once been distributed among the Dragonlord families into a single bloodline. Valyrian Steel, blood-forged weapons. Valyrian Steel is one of the most coveted materials in the world of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Weapons made from it are lighter, stronger, and hold an edge better than any other steel. But the secret to creating it was lost with the Doom of Valyria, and for good reason. The creation of Valyrian Steel wasn't just a matter of skilled metalworking, it required blood magic and human sacrifice. The steel was forged with dragonfire, yes, but also with blood, specifically the blood of slaves sacrificed in magical rituals. This is why no one has been able to recreate Valyrian Steel since the Doom. It's not just that the technical knowledge was lost, it's that the magic required is too terrible for even the most ambitious smiths to attempt. The few who have tried have either failed or disappeared under mysterious circumstances. In House of the Dragon, we see several Valyrian steel weapons. Dark Sister, wielded by Daemon Targaryen, and Blackfire, the Sword of Kings, are two of the most famous. Each of these blades represents not just exceptional craftsmanship, but the lives of countless slaves who died to create them. The rippled patterns visible in Valyrian steel blades aren't just decorative, they're the physical manifestation of the blood magic used in their creation. Each wave in the metal represents souls bound to the steel, giving it its supernatural properties. This explains why Valyrian steel can kill White Walkers in Game of Thrones. It's not just the quality of the metal, it's the blood magic infused within it. Every time a character wields a Valyrian steel sword, they're wielding a weapon created through human sacrifice, whether they know it or not. Genetic experimentation, creating monsters and marvels. One of the darkest aspects of Valyrian civilization was their experimentation with genetics and blood magic. The Valyrians weren't content with just taming dragons. They wanted to reshape life itself according to their desires. The evidence for this is scattered throughout the lore. The manticores, basilisks, and other unnatural creatures mentioned in the books are said to be the result of Valyrian experiments. But their most disturbing creations were their attempts to blend human and animal characteristics. The most famous examples are the sphinxes, creatures with human faces but the bodies of various animals. While often described as statues in the current timeline, there are hints that the original sphinxes were living beings, created through blood magic to serve as guardians and status symbols. Even more disturbing are the rumors about the origins of the Faceless Men. This guild of assassins began in the mines beneath the 14 Flames, where slaves from countless different lands and races were worked to death. According to legend, the first Faceless Man discovered how to change his appearance, possibly using techniques derived from observing Valyrian flesh-shaping magic. In House of the Dragon, we don't see these experiments directly, but their legacy lives on in the Targaryen obsession with blood purity and their occasional monstrous births. Daemon mentions to Rhaenyra in Season 1 that Targaryen babies sometimes hatch with scales or small wings, deformities that might be the result of centuries of genetic manipulation and inbreeding. The Valyrians' experiments weren't limited to creating new life forms. They also sought to enhance themselves, using blood magic to extend their lifespans and increase their resistance to fire and disease. This explains why some Targaryens, though not all, have a higher tolerance for heat. It's not a natural trait, but the result of ancient magical manipulation of their bloodline. The Doom of Valyria, hubris and destruction. The Doom of Valyria is one of the most catastrophic events in the history of the Game of Thrones world. In a single day, the entire Valyrian peninsula was destroyed by a cataclysm involving massive volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and firestorms. The 14 flames all erupted simultaneously, and the land itself broke apart, allowing the sea to rush in. Almost every dragonlord family was wiped out instantly. Only House Targaryen survived because they had relocated to Dragonstone 12 years earlier, following Daenerys Targaryen's prophetic dream. But what caused the doom? The official explanation is a natural disaster, a massive volcanic eruption. But there are darker theories that better fit the evidence. The most compelling theory is that the doom was caused by the Valyrians themselves. In their quest for more power and magic, they delved too deeply into the 14 flames, disrupting the delicate balance that kept the volcanoes dormant. Their slaves, led by the early Faceless Men, may have deliberately triggered the catastrophe by killing the mages who maintained the spells containing the volcano's power. Another theory suggests that the doom was divine punishment for the Valyrians' hubris and cruelty. They had enslaved millions, performed blood magic on an industrial scale, and even attempted to create life and reshape reality itself. In a world where gods demonstrably exist, such actions might have consequences. Whatever the cause, the doom's aftermath was equally devastating. The area around Valyria became known as the Smoking Sea, a treacherous region where the water boils and demons haunt the ruins. Anyone who sails too close is said to be cursed. Even centuries later, no one dares to colonize the region. In House of the Dragon, the doom looms large in Targaryen consciousness. It's why they cling so desperately to their dragons and their bloodline. They're the last remnant of a once great civilization, and they live in fear of a second doom that would wipe them out completely. The Valyrian legacy. What survived the doom? Despite the total destruction of Valyria, its legacy lives on throughout the world of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Understanding this legacy is crucial to appreciating the political landscape of both series. First and most obviously, House Targaryen survived with their dragons. They used this power to conquer Westeros and establish a dynasty that would rule for nearly 300 years. But they weren't the only Valyrian descendants to shape the world after the Doom. The free cities of Essos, Braavos, Pentos, Myr, Lys, Tyrosh, Volantis, Qohor, Norvos, and Lorath were all either Valyrian colonies or founded in response to Valyrian expansion. Each preserved different aspects of Valyrian culture and technology. Volantis, for example, maintained slavery and even tried to rebuild the Freehold after the Doom. Qohor preserved some knowledge of working with Valyrian Steel, though they can only reforge existing steel, not create new blades. The Valyrian roads still stand, virtually indestructible highways of fused stone that connect the former colonies. The Valyrian language survived as High Valyrian, which became the scholarly and diplomatic language of the known world, similar to how Latin functioned in medieval Europe. In House of the Dragon, we see the Targaryens speaking it in private moments and formal ceremonies, maintaining this connection to their heritage. The various dialects of Valyrian spoken in the free cities evolved from this original tongue, much like the Romance languages evolved from Latin. Perhaps most significantly, Valyrian knowledge of dragon taming survived through the Targaryens. While they lost many of the more advanced blood magic techniques, they retained enough knowledge to maintain their bond with dragons for generations. This monopoly on dragons was the foundation of Targaryen power, allowing a single family to control an entire continent. But the Valyrian legacy isn't just about tangible things like roads, language, and dragons. It's also about ideas and cultural practices that shaped the world. The Valyrian concept of slavery was so deeply ingrained that it persisted in most of the free cities. Their practice of solving problems through overwhelming force, fire, and blood became the Targaryen approach to rule. Even their incestuous marriage practices continued, isolating the Targaryens from the Westerosi nobility they governed. In House of the Dragon, we're seeing the consequences of this legacy play out. The Dance of the Dragons isn't just a succession crisis. It's the inevitable result of a family that never fully integrated into the culture they ruled, maintaining Valyrian practices that the rest of Westeros viewed with suspicion and disgust. The Targaryens are, in many ways, the last living embodiment of Valyria, and like Valyria, their power contains the seeds of their own destruction. Their obsession with bloodlines, prophecy, and dragons ultimately tears them apart, just as Valyria's obsession with power and magic led to the Doom. The Valyrian Empire represents the pinnacle of power and advancement in the world of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, but it was built on a foundation of blood, slavery, and dark magic. Their legacy shaped everything about the world we see in these shows, from the Targaryen dynasty to the political structure of Essos. Understanding Valyria helps us understand why the Targaryens are the way they are, their strengths and their fatal flaws, their incestuous marriages, their obsession with dragons and prophecy, their tendency to solve problems with fire and blood. All of these traits can be traced back to their Valyrian heritage. The Doom of Valyria wasn't just a natural disaster, it was the inevitable consequence of a civilization that pushed too far in its quest for power and knowledge. The Targaryens escaped that fate, but as we see in House of the Dragon, they couldn't escape the cultural legacy that would eventually tear their family apart. In many ways, the Dance of the Dragons is history repeating itself, another dragonlord civil war that, like the conflicts that must have occurred in ancient Valyria, leads to destruction and decline. The Targaryens brought the best and worst of Valyria to Westeros, and both aspects of that legacy shape their ultimate fate. As we continue watching House of the Dragon, keep these aspects of Valyrian history in mind. They provide crucial context for understanding why characters make the decisions they do, and why this conflict was perhaps inevitable from the moment Aegon the Conqueror decided to rule Westeros as a Valyrian dragonlord rather than adapting to the culture he conquered. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the Valyrian Empire, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which aspect of Valyrian culture you find most fascinating or disturbing. This is Explainified, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the Valyrian Empire. If you want to learn more about the ancient history that shaped House of the Dragon, check out my video on the great houses before the Targaryens arrived, which I'll link right here. And don't forget to subscribe for more Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon explained videos coming every week. This is Explainified, and I'll see you in the next one.